going to be starting with a panel, and this is one I've been looking forward to, and I don't say that to all the guests, because this one we do like to catch up as a group before we actually do these events. And I think we almost wrote off half an afternoon talking about what we're going to be talking about today. So we will try and put an end on it at some point. We are talking about the Boys Club, how women in finance are smashing through the glass ceiling. So I'll introduce my guest, if I can avoid falling off the front of the stage. We have Angelique Dwyer. He's the Chief Customer Officer at BCB Group. Angelique's career spanned numerous global roles in Tier 1 banks and across multiple products, including HSBC, Nomura, Lehman Brothers, UBS and Citi. We also have Nina Etienne, who's the VP Marketing in Europe at SumUp. With a master's degree in geography from the University of Cambridge, Nina brings a deep understanding of global perspective and nuance. She's a creative-minded individual with a passion for storytelling and building brands. Nina intends to help SumUp products reach new markets and users, spreading SumUp's message of support for small merchants globally. And finally, literally just off the train, just off the Eurostar, Clémentine Svartz, Head of Finance at Spendesk. They're a 7-in-1 spend management solution, liberating businesses and people to do their best work. She's been leading the finance team for 3 years, managing both accounting and FP&A departments. And thank you so much for, I think, actually running across London to make it here just in time. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. So just to remind you of the title of this panel, that's Boys Club, How Women in Finance Are Smashing the Glass Ceiling. So make sure you think about any questions you might want to ask. We'll be going to your questions at the end and to our virtual audience too. So, well, let's dig into what we're talking about today. I think we can all say with a great deal of certainty, women have made huge strides in the workplace. Things have changed incredibly, whether it's addressing the gender pay gap, plenty of work to do, but work is happening, getting voices heard in the boardroom, being represented in high-ranking leadership positions. Things are moving in the right direction, although some industries are still resistant to that change in places. Finance potentially could be one of those. Sometimes a bit of a reputation of a boys' club, the macho image, the hostility. What I want to dig into, is this real? Is this just a perception? What can be done about it? So, when I said, is this real, I saw some very sage expressions being pointed in my direction. So, well, thank you all of you for joining. But let's talk about the reasoning behind that persistent macho image and how it permeates the sector. Where does it come from? Is it still real, or is it just a perception? I'll start on here.
Yeah, sure. I think it is still real. I think we've made a lot of strides, but if you kind of think about that male macho kind of persona, this takes a bit of getting used to, doesn't it?
It does.
Kind of stems from Wall Street. You look back to like the 1940s and 1950s. Women on Wall Street were there, but they were only ever there in support roles. They were there secretarially, and the men were there in these kind of big, powerful roles, and we were kind of maybe a little bit subservient to that. And that only really changed in the late 1960s when Muriel Siebert, who was the first lady of Wall Street, came in and had her first seat on the New York Stock Exchange, right? So that then paved the way, but she was still the sole female for 10 years in that space. I do love a bit of history. I promise it won't all be about history today. But really, ironically, and we can laugh about this now, but it clearly wasn't funny for her at the time. She's also the first female that had to campaign for female washrooms in the New York Stock Exchange, right? So we're talking about an industry of men creating an environment for men, and that was just never kind of accessible or designed for women. Now fast forward, obviously the world has moved on and we've made great strides, but you kind of take that forward certainly in traditional financial services, which is predominantly my background, until I've switched to FinTech more recently, but that kind of manifests itself in this whole kind of macho bonus culture type work ethic, and I think some of that is still very dominant today. And I guess the point I'm making is there's some deep embedded history there in terms of of where we're coming from with this kind of stuff. I don't know what your views are on it.
Yeah, I think that's right, Angelique. I think there is an image of banking, of FinTech, that is still very male. And if we look at the Fortune 500 companies, 8% are run by women, only 8% still. And I read, it stuck with me, this phrase: you can't be what you can't see. And so representation is really important, right, from the beginning, that you see the role models, you see feminine role models and female role models in leadership positions. And I work at SumUp. We're really proud that we have 45% of our SumUppers, which are 3,000 around the world, are women. But we do also struggle with making sure that that representation sticks at each step of leadership. And I think here it's very critical that representation is at every stage of leadership, in order that when people are in board meetings and when people are being interviewed on TV, it is also women and not just men. And so that is also out there.
Clémentine?
Yeah, I completely agree with what is being said. And looking at figures, I think that no more than 20% of top leadership positions are actually occupied by women today. It happens to me quite a lot working either at Spendesk today or when I was working at PwC. So audit and consulting companies being the only female in the room. And, you know, I started working at 23, 25, and it was crazy to just be this only woman sitting in the room. And I think we all have, even ourselves women, still think ourselves as needed to fight again for our position. And there are also still some culture, pop culture style. I mean, looking at movies like Wolf of Wall Street or stuff like that, you know, you have this image of finance industry and sectors of misogyny, of non-ethical, of pressure. And I think we need to get over this image and fight for that, us as women, but overall as professionals or male or women.
So I think it's the case where everyone's got a story. From my experience, whenever I've been, I managed an all-female team at one point, and it was a story I told yesterday, how one person, when they started 40 years ago, she was told, "You have taken a job from a man." Someone said that to her face. I absolutely would never say that to her face, because I probably wouldn't hear the last of it, but you know what I mean? It's scary, those sort of stories. Have any of you had any of those particular experiences or heard of people having those experiences that just stop you in your tracks and go, look, this is ridiculous?
I don't have on my side, but apart from, you know, being the only woman in a lot of many rooms. So I'm lucky enough, I started 10 years ago my career, so having graduated from a business school, where things started to change already by then, so that's great, but we still need to be present in educational industries, in a business school, in whatever engineering schools to promote that. And I think it's really great that we have the opportunity today to speak here. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have this kind of experience. Maybe you could have some.
Yeah, well, maybe it's just me and they weren't brave enough to say it to my face, but no, I haven't. But again, very similar to your experience, Clémentine, is, going back 20 years in my career, I was definitely the only female around the table. And thankfully that's changed, but for such a long time that was the case. And, you know, you're kind of looking for the female perspective in the room and you look around and you remember, oh, it's not here. Yeah, I mean, I have heard some horror stories around, you know, things like that being said to people, but thankfully not being directly on the receiving end of one of them. I don't know if you've got a different view.
Angelique, I mean, I haven't had it so direct as that, but I have had comments, you know, on maybe what I'm wearing in a feedback review. You know, something like this that's really not that appropriate, you know, isn't related to my performance. I've been told previously, you know, maybe act more like a man, and I think that's a feedback that women get a lot is, you know, be louder, be more confident. And there's actually a very interesting Harvard Business Review article around, you know, this term confidence is being weaponized against women, because on the one hand you're told to be loud and confident and, you know, demonstrate those more masculine traits. And on the other hand, when you display that and you are louder, there's this kind of criticism, oh, is that person overconfident and therefore, you know,
Aggressive.
is aggressive, or is, you know, or they're a bit weak because they're showing, you know, too much confidence, it's a performance. And so I think we as women have a really difficult balancing act, where there is the societal pressure of being feminine and all of the sexism that has existed in the past. There is the organizational pressure where we're not represented in all levels. And yeah, there's moments of this that, you know, we face these obstacles, and I've certainly faced them, not as intensely as this one story, but I think there's also many microaggressions that women face. And we were talking, weren't we, Angelique? There's this really great report that's done by McKinsey and Lean In. It's just been released. They do it every year. It's US focused, but they're really talking about these microaggressions. You know, women being talked over in meetings, women not being able to say something, women being perceived as more junior, and they say, "Oh, I didn't realise you'd be that type of role." You know, comments like this that we face that are not big deals, but they build up over time, and it does create that inequality. I think.
Yeah, I know I've been in the situation where I've been on an interview panel and there's been myself and a female colleague, and I've had a male interviewee sitting in front of us, and all he did was answer questions to me, even if my female colleague had asked the question. And to be honest, before the end of it, I'd already put a line through his name. I'm like, I don't know if I actually want to work with you. You're not the kind of person I want on my team. But I'm going to mix things up. Luke is at the back with the microphone. I'm catching him on his toes. Has anyone here got an example they'd want to share of any particular difficulties? We do have one here at the front. Sorry, Luke, I've mixed things up. I normally only go to the audience at the end. I just want to see if you're paying attention.
All on our toes.
When you spoke about the example of being a female in a work environment, I had one situation where I had a client who was an older male ask me a question. He didn't like my answer. His response was, "Put a man on the phone," word for word. So I had to give the phone over, and my male colleague said exactly the same thing, and he was fine with that.
So he took the answer that your male colleague
exactly.
offered?
But word for word, I was told, "Put a man on the phone."
And nobody say anything to that.
He's a client,
sentence.
right?
Yeah, but still.
Exactly.
Do you want to have this kind of
but that's the environment, and this is like my banking days where, again, male-dominated environment. They're bringing in money. It was kind of like, well, just take it.
I'm so sorry
that
you
is
had that
horrendous.
experience.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
That's absolutely horrendous. Thank you for sharing that. If we any other examples anyone's wanting to share before we move on? Okay, we'll move on. Apologies, Luke kept him on his toes there, just seeing if he was paying attention. But if we look at there was a study published in the Venture Capital Journal that stated that women-led startups are receiving less than 3% of the funding from venture capital firms. Do you agree with this? Does this sound familiar? And Clémentine, I'll come to you with this first. You know, why do you think there are some of those disparities there?
It's not really a thing I can agree on it. The figures are figures again. I'm a finance woman in a financial sector, so I'm assuming these figures are sadly correct. But it's not really a surprise. First, one of the main reasons, and again this is sad, is the fact that there are still few women that are actually creating companies. Maybe 15 or 20%, so it's not a surprise that the funds from VC companies or overall private equities are very low, but the 3% is really shocking. I'm not exactly sure, but one of the reasons could also be that VC and private equities companies are still a lot led by men, around 10%, and I don't know if you tend to invest in people that are all like you, but basically I think men would tend to invest in male-led companies and women also. So that needs to change definitely to promote the presence of female within VCs. And again, we need to change the whole ecosystem and having women create companies and make them feel confident and empowered to do that, and that would definitely change the way funds are going throughout the company's ecosystem.
There's one thing I did want to pick up on as well. It was an expression you used, and we were chatting about this before we came on, and that was microaggressions. It doesn't need to be that grand, shocking gesture like you heard. What kind of things would you classify as microaggressions? Where are they coming through? Because there might be examples where people are exhibiting that behaviour and not realising that it feels like that. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I phrased that properly, but what sort of things are we talking about here?
So I think it's being mindful of the women in a meeting. Let's say this is a simple one, making sure that they have a voice, that they're heard, making sure that they're not spoken over. There's more intense things, like role title parity. There's more, the bigger moments like this. But I think it's really around looking at your behaviours and looking at the behaviours of how women are treated. Is that same to men? Feedback's a big topic, right? Women receive feedback in different ways, much more subjective than objective. And the words that are used are very different to women than to men. So it's just, I think what we could do is be really mindful of that and be mindful of the importance of diversity, whether it's gender, whether it's beyond gender, and make sure that everybody and diversity of thought exists in a room and that it's respected in a room as well.
Yeah, open that up to the rest of you.
I mean, I guess my thought on that though is as well, women tend to communicate kind of differently to men, not speaking an entirely different language, but what may be acceptable from one male to another is definitely not okay to a female, and that's not being hypersensitive. That's just being thoughtful around who you're speaking to, what you're saying. I mean, I had an example, and they shall remain nameless, but I was in a position a while ago, not too long ago actually, where I was in a room with some senior males who said, at the time I was the head of customer success at BCB, and they said, at customer success, what's that? Is that all that nice telephone stuff? To which I then had to stomp my ground and actually say, well, no, and kind of reeled off my CV to kind of, not that I should have had to, but whether it was meant as patronising or not, is another thing. It was somebody whose first language wasn't English. But again, how that makes you feel, it is, that you got to think before you speak, essentially.
Exactly, Angelique, and I think women are very sensitive, actually. There's a lot of vernacular now around, imposter syndrome, right? We feel a bit more vulnerable. We are not represented in all rooms, and so we're a little bit more conscious of the critique we get or the feedback we get. And I think in that case, you can go defensive and say actually this, but not everybody has the confidence to do that. And if you're more junior in your career, you might not have learnt those tools yet, and you shouldn't really be in that position, unfortunately. So that's again back to being, be mindful of the way in which your comments might come across. Even if you think the person can handle it, they shouldn't have to.
Lack of representation, this is a theme that seems to be coming up a lot, so let's dig into that a little bit if we can. What reasons are there for the lack of female representation, particularly when we're talking about real decision-making positions, really top level? What barriers are there that stop people and women reaching those sort of positions in the first place?
I think definitely some reason are the facts, again, figures. There are less women in some industries, and especially in the financial industries, and I think we all need role model in terms of experience, career, charisma or whatsoever. And it's definitely, if you see women, you say, okay, I want to be that, I want to be her, I want to be that woman. And so the more we'll have, the more female and women would like to be in those positions. We mentioned at the beginning of this talk the macho image that financial industry have, and this is completely true, so we need to change that. And having even more top management or C-level women would able to increase the representation of women. I think it's called the multiplier effect or something like that, saying that one woman within a C-level position would actually bring 3 additional women within the top management of any companies. So we definitely need to promote that and empower those women to achieve and be at those positions, so that, again, we're speaking about gender equality, but basically we're also speaking about any type of equality.
It's that role model that we're looking for, right?
It's the role model, and I think, Neil, at every step, you do see a drop in women representation, and there's many factors, that we could explain for that. But what we're also seeing now is that women leaders are leaving at a higher rate than men. COVID has played its role. There's 47% of women need flexible working versus 35% of men. That's like a statistic from somewhere. So women are looking for different things, and companies maybe are not able to provide it. So I think across every step, you do have a drop-off in women. Women are leaving at a higher rate to men, so we need to fill that gap. And so we need to make sure, we are interviewing women in hiring processes fairly. We need to make sure we are promoting women fairly and making sure these things happen. That's the only way I think that we can get representation, is to hire and retain talented females. And and that's kind of critical. And thinking about organisationally, what do we change in our organisation to do that is really important. And I read on the way on the train this morning, I think it's Monster, this recruitment company. They said that they took names off CVs, and in entry-level tech positions, once they took names off, the proportion of women hired went from 5% to 57%. And that's like a technique, right? Why do we need names on CVs actually at the screening? So I think there are techniques and things like this that we can think about organisationally to change structurally this issue.
Yeah, I had a colleague who did exactly that. It was a lady I employed in a visual journalist position once a few years ago. She applied for a whole set of jobs under her name, which was a Spanish-sounding name, and she put in the same CV with a anglicised English name. Which one do you think she got more invites back for?
Shocker.
It's almost unbelievable.
Shocking. Absolutely
almost
shocking.
Unbelievable, and yet still exists.
Exactly, and just the point that Nina made there, actually, because we were talking about this earlier on as well. The fact that the senior women are already starting to drop out of the industry because, they're well, for a variety of reasons. Not only have we got this kind of, that drop off in itself, the pipeline now is affected of women that are coming into the industry as well. So we're at this is going to have knock-on impact, for generations to come if we really the industry doesn't get its head or its hands or whatever it is that it needs to around what it takes to retain female talent, because it's not there. And I think there's a whole plethora of things like women not feeling comfortable to ask for the level of flexibility that they need in their roles, whether they have a family or not, whether they just don't want to work in an office, whether they're more productive from home. There's this whole piece that we're still contending with, which is actually compounding the issue, and it's potentially, without wanting to sound pessimistic, it's going to undo some of the really good work and the progress that we've made, certainly in this industry, for women. So, a bit of a scary time, actually.
Yeah, well, I want to get one more question in before we go to the room and any questions online as well. Is we've talked about of making that change. If you can't see it, if you can't be it, we need these role models. What do we think is the best way to achieve that? Do we stick with the organic process of almost trickle down? It's going to keep improving, but maybe slowly, or does there need to be almost a positive intervention? What do we think? What do we think is going to be the best way to try and sort out that lack of talent that is there being given the opportunity?
Sudden sharp jolt, or I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know what your views are. I'm kind of...
I know it's the silver bullet question, isn't it? If we can solve this now,
bullet.
then fantastic, but I doubt we are. But what do we think?
So definitely, I think we need to understand why there are so few women at this kind of levels. So basically, I think we mentioned some of the reasons, and we need to tackle those reasons. So you mentioned, and I fully agree with you, and I think the figures were post-COVID really different. I think flexibility, flexible work, remote policies needs to be really encouraged. That definitely would be one of the reason or factor to change that. And again, what we're doing today is speak, communicate, and shows that it's possible, and you do not need to be aggressive or be so confident in yourself or negative or whatsoever to fight for your position. So again, communicate and understand why it's still happening today.
Okay.
I mean, if I can just add my opinion just quickly, I think we do need some interventions, actually. I think we need to make sure when we are hiring that the women are in the selection. We need to have quotas on women at different seniority levels. I think we need to look at and understand the problem in each company. So we're lucky in our company, we have a diversity and inclusion survey. We really understand what is the core issue, what are the core needs. We have community forums and groups, women talking to each other within companies is really helpful, actually, because we share common ground, we can share our stories, and we can come as a community and change and have that communal voice. So I would say we have to do a lot because the signs are not looking so great right now, and we need to change this, because the more successful, the more diverse the company is, the more successful it will be. It's proven. So I think, again, back to McKinsey, there's an article they did that said companies that have over 30% of women on the board are more profitable. So it's a proven stat, but having diversity in all its different guises can make you a more profitable business. So that is worth positively investing in.
Yeah, and that McKinsey data spans back, sorry, just to add to that, is like, that's not just a 1 or 2 year flash in the pan exercise. That survey that you're talking about actually dates back for almost 10 years now.
Yes.
And it's consistent. And to your point, you can't hide, or you can't, the numbers don't lie, basically. So,
Again, and a favourite expression of mine, it's not an intelligence test to fail. Let's go to the room. Any questions we want to get in before we wrap things up? Okay, yeah, we have one at the back. Thank you.
Hello. I'm really enjoying this panel, by the way, so thank you for this. Just a question about, kind of following on from what the lady here at the front said, what can organisations do to kind of tackle these microaggressions and safeguard their female staff? Because even if it is a client that says a bad comment and they bring in money, when does it get to a point where you don't just have to put up with it, and there needs to be like some safeguarding rules in place to support, your female workers?
Very good question. When there's money on it, then suddenly do the rules change? It's what can be done?
So I personally believe the rules don't change. So I think what you experience is discrimination, which I think is unacceptable, and somebody needs to intervene in those moments where sexism is obviously displayed. That's my personal feeling, and if I was on that call, I would have called it out and stopped the call. And I think we as leaders, and we need males, allies, we talked about it earlier, to do that, to say that is not okay, and to intervene if we don't have the confidence to do it ourselves, or there is a power dynamic you face. So for me, I think one almost easy thing is call it out. If you see sexist behaviours or any discriminatory behaviours, do not let it become acceptable no matter what. And that's my personal view.
you can't put a price on that stuff. Profitable client or not, I completely agree.
Okay. Any further questions from the room? Oh yeah, just have one over there to the side.
Thank you. Yeah, great panel. I'm Rahana from the Alto Partners. I have 2 young daughters, a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I feel like by the time they get to be applying for jobs, it might already be too late in terms of, choice of career and that sort of thing. What do you think organisations can be doing to kind of get in there earlier? You've talked a lot about the time that you're already at work, but I feel like there's more that needs to be done prior to females even thinking about what jobs to apply for. Do you think organisations and female leaders should be doing more for younger generations to bridge that gap?
Great question.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, definitely. So I did not do any mentorship kind of program, but I think there are actually many, and that we could try to onboard, and even sooner. So might be even before business school. So doing a business school, we had so many panels and discussion about any companies, so not dedicated to women, but this is something that we could do. And even at high school, when you don't have any view on your future career, this is definitely something where you could attract and speak with girls that actually don't know what to do, and actually maybe never heard of the financial industries, FinTech or whatsoever, and as to still have in mind that this is a macho and men clubs only. So again, going sooner to schools, I think that should be one of the ideas.
Yeah. I think I watched something, I'm trying to remember where I saw this, but there was something on LinkedIn a while ago where this company did it almost like a day in the life, and they had they were probably, I don't know, more 15, kind of 16 years of age, but they came in and they kind of observed the organisation for a day, and then fed back quite brutally around what they saw, actually, there's a couple of things. One, it kind of really opened the employer's eyes to how we're perceived, by fresh eyes, kind of, people that aren't necessarily tarnished, don't have a tarnished opinion. But actually, it also changed some of the opinions of the people that kind of got, shuffled into the room, against their will, and said, oh, actually, this is something that is quite different to what I thought it was, and might be, something that they would consider in the future. So things like that, I think, can help as well.
Yeah, it's a question that talks dearly to me because I have 2 young daughters as well. They are 6 and 4. And even coming to this panel, right, I want to show them the video and start to already have those conversations. It's very complicated being a working mother. It's very complicated. There is an emotional load that you carry. And I think actually working, taking those roles, talking to your children, is super important that we can do individually. And then as both these wonderful ladies said, bringing this into schooling, bringing this into education. If we get to the representation part, you're going to see more women leaders on TV. You're going to, the society will change. So all of these things can come together. But I think it's very, very critical. It's a very good question.
It's a really good question.
Okay, I'll take one more question from the online audience that's been sent in here, and that is, how do we think the financial industry could handle the childcare inequality experienced by women right now? And we could do a panel. In fact, we could do several panels on this, but if we can just scratch the surface of this one quickly.
I'm going to defer to the ladies here on the left, not having children, so...
It's on me. It's hard, right? It's hard. Having children is obviously a thing that you do with a husband, a partner. But there is a caring load that the female takes, and I think there are societies now that are, really equalising that load. So Sweden, becomes actually you have the equal parental care, so that's one way that already kind of normalises the gap from work. Returning from work, we feel very vulnerable, right? We've spent this time out. We question ourselves. I experienced that deeply. Am I still good enough? Can I do this? Actually, I just want to get home on time. Your priorities change, your efficiency changes as well. So I think making sure there are forums for mothers to come together within companies, trying to look at also, equal parental leave for men, women, all genders, making it fairer in that way is really important. But I think it's still a journey we're on, honestly. And it's a daily journey and question I have for myself when I leave my kids if they're crying, or I kind of push them into the school and then run off to work, or I'm late from work. It's a very emotional topic, but I think, I can just talk from myself that I'm proud to be a working mum. I'm proud to try and find that balance, but it is a balance we have to find, and companies need to be able to support that. And back to the flexibility topic, the more flexible a company is. So for me, actually with COVID and being able to work from home, it helps me. I like to work in the office, but if my kids are sick or if the school is closed, it's not so stressful as it once was. So I think understanding that females tend to take more of a caring role, whether it's of children, whether it's of parents or more vulnerable, and creating, structures around this is going to help.
And if you'll allow me one last question before I release everyone to the networking break. I do apologise, we've got carried. In fact, I don't apologise. This is going really well. And I asked this question very personally as a man, as a male manager of female staff. You are desperate to be an ally. You're desperate to be part of the solution, but you're also desperate not to be patronising or frankly get it wrong. You're trying to help, but you don't want to do the other. What advice would you have for any men watching who are trying to do the right thing and are desperate not to be patronising? The fact I'm walking around this question in so many ways, I think it indicates exactly what I'm trying to say.
It's okay.
I'll stop talking. Go for it.
Look, I guess this panel was never meant to be about man bashing at all.
Of course, no.
But I mean, speaking from personal experience, while I've had some really great female inspiration and maybe some sponsorship at points in my career, I've also had some really, really, really positive encounters with my male colleagues and managers. So, I don't think we get it wrong all of the time. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that helped me in my career is actually a couple of my male managers or mentors or sponsors actually called out areas of strengths that I wasn't even aware of myself kind of earlier on in my career. And they, the fact that they came and said, you're really good, you thought about this, or I see you here in X number of years, that is the kind of positive dialogue we want, right? We want the positivity, we want the calling it out, you want to be recognised. I think kind of skirting around the subject, I mean, it's all the things that we talked about earlier on, right? It's just how you present that to somebody. But I think most people can, my own personal experience, if you're in the right frame of mind to be giving somebody some positive feedback, it should land relatively positively. I don't know what your thoughts are, but, for me, I think it's, it's got to happen. It can't just be female to female positive interactions all the time because the guys are afraid to put their foot in it, right?
Excellent. Okay, we are out of time. In fact, we've gone way over time. So I hope everyone has enjoyed this. And do remember, you can watch, you can share this afterwards through our socials to make sure as many people see this as possible. That's generally the idea. So thank you, all of you, for your time, and a warm round of applause for them, please.